Welcome to the Checkmk Conference also from my side. I'm happy that I see so many familiar faces again. I think for me it's now my 7th Checkmk Conference. I joined also in 2018, and it's also nice to see new faces which I've never seen before. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Checkmk 2.3, the latest Checkmk release which we released in April this year. And maybe quick show of hands, who of you is already using Checkmk 2.3? Yeah. It's better than in the last years, I would assume. So it's maybe a testament that what we try to do with Checkmk over the years to get it more stable, to get much higher quality, is paying off. And maybe after today's talks, more of you will even join in using Checkmk 2.3. So Jan already Yes, there we are, or not. Beyond the many new features, we also have a couple of other big news. And Jan already mentioned them, so it's not a surprise. The one thing is synthetic monitoring, something I work very heavily together with Simon together on. It's great because we can get deep insights into applications from the user perspective. The other thing is Checkmk SaaS. And there's one more thing, because the first things we will have big talks today in the afternoon and tomorrow about. And the third big thing is Checkmk MSP. And Checkmk MSP is nothing new. We have the Managed Service Edition for, I think, 8 years now already, or 9 years. And it received a major upgrade. It's now our Ultimate Edition. It's the edition which has every feature. And so besides the unique multi-customer management and the data segregation, it also has all the features of Checkmk Cloud. And that is something which we heard when we released Checkmk Cloud in the beginning, something a lot of the MSPs really need. Yeah? As an MSP, as a managed service provider, monitoring your customers' IT often involves a lot of dealing with networks. Yeah? And with the push mode of the agent, you can basically now monitor segregated networks much more easily, so it's actually quite a breeze to do so. And the what I call self-service agents are also a nice thing, because you can basically deliver to your customers an agent which has all the information needed built in to register itself as a site, and then also on the Checkmk server side to automatically add these hosts, so that in the end, in the ideal world, you have to do nothing, and your customers can just roll out Checkmk agents in their infrastructure, or you do that for them, of course. Besides that, we also see many of our MSPs working both in this on-premises world and in the cloud world. And having the ability to monitor both in one tool is a nice thing. And that's why actually having all the cloud monitoring features in the MSP edition now is a big benefit. And for your end customers and for yourself, being able to integrate with Grafana Cloud is, I think, the icing on the cake there. Besides these major news, we of course also did a lot of work on Checkmk 2.3. So what did we do? Our focus for Checkmk starts with the ability to monitor anything. Enabled by a powerful configuration, resulting in helpful alerts and analytics for finding the underlying issue, driven by a great user experience, and extensible interfaces for automation and development. And all that based on a secure and scalable monitoring platform. And I will also use this as a structure for the Checkmk 2.3 talk to talk about everything what's new. Let's start with monitor anything. And we have a lot of improvements for both on-premises and cloud monitoring. And on top, we have delivered a lot of things which are relevant for both worlds, for the hybrid monitoring world. And something which is applicable to everyone, no matter where your infrastructure is monitoring web services. And for me, this is one of my highlights. we always had decent web services monitoring. We had TCP, DNS, FTP, SMTP, email checks, and we of course also had the HTTP check. And besides now the new HTTP check supporting all the latest technologies, the completely revised endpoint monitoring has a much more powerful configuration, much better alerts, and it also has much better visibility for the results with the status information. And besides just doing this, we also added in-depth certificate monitoring, so that you not only monitor HTTP endpoints for the certificates, but basically anything with a TCP connection. And more on that later in the talk by Marcel. Another core technology we worked on, which is basically something you also have on premises and in the cloud, are MS SQL databases. And what started on an idea to build a new platform for database monitoring, where we leverage what we have learned over the last years with all the different databases we are monitoring, has now resulted in the first plugin with MKSQL. And for us, the goal was not to just build a drop-in replacement, but something which adds a lot of features and options so that you can monitor much more MS SQL databases in a much wider variety, because there is no normal configuration. As we have learned, every MS SQL configuration out there is kind of different. And the cool thing is that you can now also monitor remote databases like a Azure SQL with that in depth. More on that also later by Marcel again. He will share a lot of the details, what we have thought when we did that, and what you can actually now do. And when we talk about hybrid technologies, we also, of course, have to talk about Kubernetes. And in Checkmk 2.3, we focused on extending the supported platforms. So now you can monitor VMware Tanzu, you can monitor K3s, and as a special gift, Red Hat OpenShift monitoring is now also available in the Enterprise Edition. And besides many bug and usability fixes and also adding support for later and more recent Kubernetes versions, there's one thing which I want to talk about, which is Google Kubernetes Engine Autopilot. Because when we add support for one of these platforms, it can be very simple, but it can also be a long journey where we have to jump through a lot of hoops. And you might see it's looks kind of the same as Google Kubernetes Engine. Unfortunately, it is not. And it is a highly managed secure Kubernetes service by Google Cloud, and that makes it really hard for us, for users to run workloads which require elevated privileges. And which is bad for monitoring, because monitoring needs the data, otherwise it can't monitor. And we had to jump really through a lot of hoops there to get there. In the end, it meant that we need to become an official Google Cloud partner. It meant that the Google security team needs to look at our agent, check if it's really compliant with everything, that it's built in a secure way. And fortunately, we got all the sign-offs by the Google team, and now we are one of the few allow-listed partners worldwide who can actually deploy stuff into Google Kubernetes Engine Autopilot. And yeah. I think enough about talking about these cloud native things. Let's talk a little bit about where we don't have that many buzzwords. Let's talk about virtualization. And we have good virtualization monitoring actually for quite some time. If you look at our vSphere monitoring, that's pretty nice. But throughout the last 15 years, more vendors have come up, because virtualization is really still one of the hot topics, and one of them is Nutanix. And we had wishes from throughout the community that we extend this Nutanix monitoring. And so I was very happy when last year I saw this. Yeah, looks like another pull request, added some real checks. And then if you look into it, 32 commits, 90 files change, 5,200 codes of line added. So just another pull request, yeah? Thanks, Andreas. And I looked into it and I was like, what does it mean? What does it mean added some checks? So before we had 4 checks. It's okay, it's not great, it's okay. Now, that was the result after. And I think it's really bad if I would talk about it. So Andreas, maybe you want to come on stage and talk about it yourself because, I mean, so give a big round of applause for Andreas. Andreas, why did you do all this?
Okay, I wanted to receive the same information with our checks in our Nutanix environment like we had it in ESX vSphere. And if you look at the checks here, you will see that it tries to replicate that what you get inside the vSphere environment. And that was the real reason for the Nutanix rewrite.
Okay.
You said last year or 1.5 years ago that it needs to be compliant with the Checkmk guidelines, and that's also why it was so big. Normally my version was a little bit smaller, but if you want to or work in the guidelines that are defined by Checkmk, then you have to write a little bit more code.
Yeah, you should see the comments in that pull request.
Yes. Yeah, if you look through the pull request, then you will see, oh, here it needs a little bit more, and there, and some man pages, and so on.
Yeah, that's the life of Checkmk developers. Yeah. Let's jump a little bit into what we now get. Can you maybe talk a little bit what we see here, what this is?
Yes. Well, what we see here, that's a normal Nutanix what replicates a vCenter. The same as you see in the vCenter. You have your cluster-wide matrix like the I/O, CPU, memory, and then you have the same what you have in a vCenter where you get your storage volumes and so on. That's here the containers. And then you have all the virtual machines defined with their state, and you can also define what you want or which state is wanted by yourself, if it should be halted, running, and so on. And the only difference, if you compare it with vCenter, is that you have a little bit more different states and the different matrix what you see here in the Nutanix if you compare it with a vCenter.
And is it everything?
No, that's only here's a few for the vCenter replication, but now you have the VM and also the node monitoring, what's the same as the ASX host. And if you look, the biggest difference here is that you see on every Nutanix host the hard drives, as that's also a big difference to VMware. Every node has its own storage, and you have a network-wide, or you have a cluster-wide storage over all your hosts. But all the other things I should think are self-explanatory, as it's the same as in VMware.
Okay. And how was that? How was the developing of that? Was it like, how did you like the Nutanix API and so on?
If I compare it with VMware, I would say it's way better. The API is fast compared to VMware, and also from the structure. You don't need to do anything with XML. Yeah, it's no one here, I think, want to parse XML files. And it's with a normal REST API like it is in the Nutanix, it's okay, but you have another problem there. You have 3 different APIs. The old one, the middle new one, and the new one. And the problem is some values you get only in the old one, and some values only in the new one. That makes it a little bit complicated.
Yeah, I mean, the 5,000 lines of code have to come from somewhere. Yeah. Andreas, thank you very much for that. Maybe some big round of applause for that.
Sure.
And Andreas, I found this other thing also on my Checkmk site.
Yes.
I see this name Andreas Döhler here as well. And there's like this extension package, MKP, Redfish. And I found it on my site. And I mean, of course, I asked ChatGPT, yeah, what is this? And I mean, all I got was this lousy picture. And maybe Andreas, can you talk a little bit about what is Redfish? Why is this so important? Why is this so?
Yeah, so the Redfish extension is quite a little bit older than the Nutanix. As this, I started, I think, around 2018 or so, and it was. And so if you say the why I start this, it was the same as every time something was broken, and it was SNMP was broken with HP devices like it is now again. Yeah, everyone who has a HP server in his monitoring at the moment with quite new controllers, he knows that SNMP is not working correctly at the moment. So, and that was 2018. I was looking for a replacement as we had the same problem with SNMP at this time. And so I come across Redfish documentation for managing as an industry-wide standard for managing server devices. And after some reading inside, I must say very good documentation in this case. I was saying, yes, that looks promising. And I started to implement it only for HP at the start. Then the next step was Dell, and so on. You see it here. That's only the 3 versions on the Exchange. There were some more on my GitHub also, but that's the 3 main versions I used for Lenovo, Dell, and HP. And later I was saying, as there come more and more requests for other devices, and I said, why not build a unified one, what can monitor all the different vendors? And so we come to the Redfish RESTful RP checks, what's vendor independent mainly. And that was then to make all in one wing, that was a little bit of work, I would say. As every vendor has its own specific extensions or not the implementation, but the extensions to the standard.
Let's take a look a little bit at what we get. Can you maybe just walk us very quickly through what we see here?
What we see here is a normal Dell server. And if you look at the single items, what you see, that is nearly the same what you get with the Dell SNMP checks for the management board, but I think with a little bit more information about the single items. In a normal SNMP check, you have for a fan, you have your speed, okay, that's fine, and you have your status, that's fine, that's the same as here. But when you look at single hard drives or anything like that, or memory modules, you get more information like what type is it, serial numbers, status, and so on. I think it's a little bit more for the same, a little bit more information.
There's more. Not everything did fit on one page, so.
Yeah, I think everyone who does infrastructure monitoring here knows that management interfaces can have, without problem, 100 checks or so.
And what is so nice about it is that we get exactly the same for, let's take, for example, HPE ILO,
yes. In the normal case, if you have a standard server, then you get on every vendor the same information. Only the naming convention is a little bit different. What you see here, I tried to make it the same for everyone. It's the starting with fan or memory or storage controller, but the name behind can be different for every vendor. But I try to make it so that you see it in the same way on every device.
Okay, pretty cool. So we decided for Checkmk 2.3 to bring this in as a built-in MKP, so that you need to activate it first because we consider it still an experimental feature. Even though, I mean, Andreas is using it heavily, I know that a lot of people are also using it already in production, but building a generic monitoring is not straightforward. As you have seen, like the feedback we have gotten already during the beta phase, there are just so many different implementations, so many edge cases that it needs some time to basically hone that proper out. And the current mode, it being an MKP, allows really Andreas to work much more quickly. Because, I mean, as soon as he mainlines it, he has to write the man pages, he has to write this and that, he has to change the code. We also have to change the code a lot, and in the end, we as a vendor always have to make sure that we do as little as incompatibilities as we can. And so any major change is something which we try to avoid. So that's why we said, hey, 2.3 is a great time. Andreas can quickly react to feedback, can build it in, can offer new MKPs for you to download and then put into your site. And therefore, if you have any feedback, you can create an issue in the GitHub repository of Andreas. You can also get newer MKPs. I think you already added new features.
Yeah, it's a last feature what was requested from one user in the forum was to monitor his PDUs, and so I get a data dump from his Raritan PDU, and now we have also the possibility with the last version to monitor PDUs that are working with the Redfish standard, and that was okay. That was not such big step, but it's implemented now, so you can monitor your electrical devices also inside your systems.
So, and for 2.4, we will then finally mainline it. We'll probably do a lot of changes around it, and we will then start to also take over the maintenance for it. And yeah, Andreas, this was a big thing,
yeah.
And I know that you do this basically a lot in your free time. And I mean, I want to say a little bit a thank you to you, and it's not much, but another award for you. And I think let's give a big round of applause because Andreas is really.
Good.
Andreas has done really a big service. I mean, you know him from the forum. He is answering there day and night, not as much as you used to be honest. I think you know more in the coding world. I mean, that's good because, I mean, we all benefit from that as well. And let's hope that I heard that you also want to do something with Hyper-V. Let's see.
We have the next projects already finished for NetApp E-Series, for instance. There's no monitoring at the moment inside Checkmk. Or not included monitoring. Yeah. The package is already existing there some years.
Yeah. So thanks. You can, by the way, also get a nice present, small gift only, of course, but in the bag as well. Thanks very much, Andreas.
Yep.
Okay, I mean, we also do some stuff ourselves, don't worry. And one of the things we did ourselves was storage monitoring. We don't do everything, as Andreas mentioned, but what we did for 2.3 is to work on monitoring for pure storage. It's actually a vendor which was founded the same year as Nutanix in 2009, and since then it's actually become quite a prominent player. We see it all over the world now, and finally you can monitor the flash arrays with Checkmk 2.3. And when we talk about storage monitoring, we cannot not talk about NetApp. And NetApp replaced their old API, I think early this year. And just in time, we delivered a new drop-in replacement, which is built on the new API, on the ONTAP REST API. It delivers basically exactly what we did before, just with a new special agent. And so it's more future-proof so that we can all just enjoy the next couple of years until they come up with a new API again. Let's see. And here, thanks to SVA, Gerd and Benedikt, because they helped us a lot. They set up a system for us where we can develop against, and that really sped up the development of this. So thanks, Gerd, as well. Another integration which needed a lot of love was our NTOP NG integration for network flow monitoring. And in early 2023, it got our attention. It was originally built versus the version 1 of the REST API of NTOP, and it had some issues, timeouts, buggy views, also usability issues, and therefore we decided to completely fix it and improve it. And it's now built on the version 2 of the REST API. Everything works properly again. You have the views, the filters, all the dropdowns work as expected. We have a lot of usability fixes and error message fixes along the way, and a much better performance because we re-architected a lot of the long-running API calls and built a couple of features like pagination so that you can now monitor network flow, or you can integrate network flow monitoring much better into Checkmk. Besides these big things, it's also important that we always work on the smaller things. And I'm going to bring some examples because going through all the 75 improvements which we did will take quite some time. But just to describe in what kind of categories we think, there can be, for example, more checks. System hierarchy, now you can monitor power supplies, was actually a pull request. Linux bonding interfaces, you can now, for example, monitor the expected bonding mode. Besides more checks, what we also do is that you get more information. For example, the connection state of interfaces on Windows machines is now monitored without the need to have a agent plugin. And beware, this might lead when you update to Checkmk 2.3 to some state changes, because now you get actually the proper state in Checkmk directly delivered without the agent plugin. Also, for example, an example of what we do when we talk about more information is the tags which are in Azure are now directly imported as service labels into Checkmk. And lastly, we also try to improve the configuration, which extend the monitoring then in the end. And one example is, for example, that you can now monitor Microsoft Mail using OAuth. And the last thing, and to basically showcase what I mean about it, I actually brought a screenshot. As of today, or as of 2.2, the alerting of CPU load, so something which has been there for quite some time with Checkmk, I mean, I think it's probably one of the first checks, was limited or was basically just on the 15-minute load. But we also have 1 and 5-minute load. And 15-minute load is actually quite good because it averages out all the spikes, makes your monitoring much more stable. You don't get a lot of false alerts. But what you can't do with it is you can't monitor any spike anymore. Yeah, and if you want to do that, maybe let's take a look at the rule set. I mean, I don't know which thing you configure there, 1, 5, 50-minute, but you can only configure one. What you can now do is you can monitor the 5-minute, the 1-minute, and the 15-minute average. So it's a good example of how we can even extend a long-running and long-existing check. And if you take a look at this, here I get very often asked, is this the default? No, it's not. And when people then ask, where do I find the default thresholds for a check? Where do you look? We can now look at the man page. The main page now includes what are the default parameters for checks. And as you can see, for 1 and 5-minute, there is no default parameter, but for 15-minute, we have the 5 and the 10 on the load per core. All in all, we added and improved more than 100 monitoring plugins. For more than 30 systems, we added new checks, or basically wrote completely new stuff. We made these improvements, as I just spoke about, and of course, we did a lot of fixes. More than 450. And I just brought some logos. If you spot something which might be relevant to you, feel free to take a look at the works and find whatever it is which we did there. So for monitoring anything, we also need powerful configuration. And one of the most powerful tools for configuring your monitoring are labels. And what we now do is we supply much more host labels off the shelf. And it's not just the operating system types, or what we had already before in Checkmk. You also now get much more OS properties like the platform, the name, the version. And the nice thing about it is It's not only for Linux and Windows. We made this for basically any agent which we support. So even for AIX and also for FreeBSD and so on. You will not always get all the information because not every system has all information. But what we tried is that we basically gather everything which is easily accessible. And now imagine that we have all these labels. I mean, it's nice, but what do you do with them? You obviously need to put them somewhere into rules, into conditions. And what we had in 2.2 was this. We can, for example, say, has OS family Linux and is not environment test. What you can't do, for example, is has label Linux and has label or has label Windows. So you cannot do an or combination. But this is something which we already built somewhere in the user interface. It's something which we built in filters, and now we put this concept also and moved it to the rule sets that you can use in the conditions, very flexible labels. And this is something which we also made available, of course, via the REST API. So let's now imagine we have all these new host labels. What will happen? This will happen. Yeah. Enjoy a lot of new alerts, a lot of new warnings if you have not silenced that. And I mean, we all know that you really like clicking through the user interface, that you really like to do the rediscovery on all of that. And yeah, so we just left it like that, of course, yeah? Just kidding. Before we had this one option for the automatically update service configuration. And this dropdown, yeah, you can add unmonitored services and new host labels, but there was no option to just update host labels. And the combinations can be risky because, I mean, sometimes you don't want to remove vanished services. Sometimes you don't want to add unmonitored services. You want to have that as a conscious choice. And host labels, something which is more dynamic, this should just happen. And you can already see what we did. And I mean, initially we said, let's just add another option. I mean, what can go wrong just adding more options into this drop-down? But thankfully, my colleague Niklas was very insistent that we do this better. And so we just built this very nice checkboxes, so you can just mix and match as you want. You have fine-grained control. You can just decide, I just want to update host labels for these hosts. We want to update host labels and remove vanished services for the other host. And now you have all this as you can do all this, and you can also do this in the bulk discovery, and you can also do this via the REST API. And maybe some of you have spotted this, update service labels. It's a new feature which we also added. And it's something which seemed kind of impossible a couple of years ago. And fortunately, it's now possible. And what this means, or why I mean, not everyone is using service labels. So to showcase a little bit why this is a helpful thing, I brought an example. And typically, I mean, we got this actually as a feature request from one customer who is doing a lot of network device monitoring. And what they do is they assign based on alias service labels. And the alias of an interface can change. What happens then is the service label changes. And they use the service label for rule conditions to adjust the monitoring. And before, what you had to do is you had to throw out the entire service, rediscover it, so remove and add. And that's 2 clicks, which takes some time because you need to do a service discovery along the way. And so the new solution is actually quite nice. There's a button there, just rediscover that service, and the service labels will then be updated automatically. So it's just 1 click, and you can also do that in bulk. And it's also looking a little bit nicer. It's more clear what are new service labels, what are service labels which were removed, which ones changed. Yeah. When we talk about the service discovery, we also did over the last year quite a lot of improvements in there. And one of them is more consistency. It's actually, I would say it's actually a bug, but the feature which we just saw, the automatically update service configuration, if you had something like do not activate changes enabled as well with that, these changes would not be visible in the audit log or in the activate pending changes. That's now solved. So very nice, of course. We have better error messages. You might have seen this if you have that activated, the automatic rediscovery. Then sometimes it says rediscovery scheduled. But what could very well happen is that nothing happens. Because if, for example, a data source fails, then this automatic rediscovery is not being done because it's quite a risky change then. If a data source disappears or doesn't work anymore, all the services among that will vanish. And if you just accept that, all of your monitoring for that is gone, even if this is something which you might not want. So we said this is something which is so fundamental, this is something you need to do manually. And we basically just fixed the error message for that so that you actually know what to do. And by the way, thanks Tom from SVA who basically pointed us towards that. And something which bugged me quite a lot when we reworked in 2.2 the service discovery, it always had this really nice error message, no cached data available. And actually independent of the actual error message behind. And it now has a proper error message. We actually get, if it's, for example, the agent timed out, then you will see that in the service discovery also. It's something which we backported, of course, also to 2.2. It's nothing new in 2.3, but that's something to showcase that we continuously worked on things which we introduce to improve them over time. A monitoring without alerts and good visualization is like a laptop without a screen. It's nice, but you can't really do anything with it. So we fulfilled a couple of long-time user dreams, and one of them is the so-called top list. And something which now works in also very large environments is possible with that. You can, for example, look at which system has the highest, or which systems have the highest CPU load, or which file systems are utilized the least. It's something which is very easily configurable. It's a dashlet. You can rank any metric. You can add it easily to dashboards. You can flexibly filter with host and service filters. And you can find the right metric with these helper functions. It's very simple to configure. And most importantly, it is very quick. And to be able to do so, we had to extend live status. And first thing we had to do is add a new order by header. For example, you can now create live status queries which return a sorted list of host names or metrics as well, yeah. And you can, for example, sort host names A to C or Z to A. And you can combine this with a limit header to, for example, just return the first result. And for anyone who is working with live status, building their own features, I think this is something very nice and something very helpful. If you combine that with this new column performance data, we have everything available to build these top lists because we can then combine them and get sorted metrics back. The UI can then aggregate the metrics, the live status results, and do this from different sites and then render the top lists at quick speed. And now that we have this very nice feature, what do we do with it? Do we just leave it as an option in a dashboard or dashlet for you to create? No, because we also did it to solve one user pain, which were existent in these Linux and Windows overview dashboards. Because when you have even a couple of hundred hosts already, they become very hard to use. And so we said, it's a perfect place to actually implement the top lists, because then, whenever you open them, they actually load much, much quicker. And we replaced therefore a lot of the previous dashlets on these dashboards. We still have some of the older views because they are still very helpful. They help us. They have a couple of more features which are powerful. And so it's, I think, a good compromise at the moment between this very fast loading and some elements which take a little bit longer to load. And eventually, when we extend this functionality of live status to more features, to more dashlets, to more views, we can hopefully also replace these things in the future as well. Besides such big features, it is always important to work on the smaller things as well and to polish the things which you work on a daily basis. And here's a big list. don't worry, I won't go into it because Moritz will do so later. They happened as a consequence of the new developer APIs, and they actually like it looks like it, but it actually makes my heart really smile because I worked a lot with our developer Simon on it, and we both really we were really happy. We couldn't stop ourselves to fix the graphing finally, to fix really all these issues which were nagging us for a long time, and which I know at least a couple of support tickets which were at least nagging also a lot of users. And besides the graphs, who of you knows these graphs in Checkmk? Yeah, some. They look very different, and they are the predictive monitoring graphs. And because we have, besides the standard graphs, we have also them. You need to enable them, and then when you basically have them enabled, they are a different part of the Checkmk UI. And what was because of this very unique handling, they were not available in the central side in distributed monitoring, because also live status didn't have the columns to transfer this information from remote sites to the central side. And now it has, so we now have the possibility, and then of course now you can also view these graphs directly from the central side in distributed monitoring. And while we were at it, we also did a lot of quality of life improvements, making the prediction algorithms more robust, fixing some edge cases, improving the visibility of it, so they become a little bit nicer to use as well. Last year at the Checkmk Conference, we had a talk about network monitoring by the Finanzinformatik, who required this feature to replace the existing monitoring solution. And they already showcased what is possible. And I mean, what we did is we built this backend. Yeah? And we promised back then, hey, this custom feature which we built for them, we will bring to all Checkmk users. And I mean, it's here today. You can see, very nice, which network devices talking to which other, which IPs and which interfaces are talking with each other. Looks pretty cool. Can even do more. You can, for example, see which IP ranges are talking to each other via which routers. And even more crazy, you can see, hey, there's a mismatch here, a duplex mismatch, or there's a speed mismatch. And you might wonder, like, can Checkmk do that now? Can we have level 2 network visualization and level 3 network visualization in Checkmk? And the answer is kind of. Last year when we presented that, we said, hey, we built this powerful backend for these visualizations. That's our job, and your job is to supply the data, which works if you're a large company and have a team, or if you have a partner who can do that for you. But for anyone else, it's, I think, then quite unusable. But we already had a lot of interest in our community that, hey, this sounds really nice. We want to play around with that. And so last year, our colleague Andreas, who built all of that, put that as an MKP on the exchange and did a forum post. And it actually didn't take long until someone reacted. By the way, this is how I think it feels for you if you try to build this for yourself. So it didn't take long, and we have this guy, THLCMK, who said, hey, Schnetz, so Andreas built this, and I think I have a solution to build the first piece of that. To have the visualization done by Checkmk and a tool which does all the other steps. And I think this was really an awesome collaboration because our developer Andreas and Thomas, let's call him Thomas, they worked together to build this. I think Thomas gave a lot of feedback, said, hey, can we have this feature? Can we have that? Would be nice. And also he built a lot of these things. And so we refined the back end. Thomas further built out this network visualization data creation tool. Thanks for the long name. And what does it do? Yeah. You can do basically with that tool and the combination with Checkmk, you can create layer 2 topologies with CDP and LLDP data. You can also do layer 3 visualization only for IPv4. Doesn't stop there. You can highlight connection issues. So for example, mismatching speed, mismatching duplex. And if there's not information which is not in Checkmk, you can also model that with static connections. So how does it work? It starts with hardware-software inventory. You need to populate Checkmk with all the data. And there are a couple of plugins. So a CDP cache plugin, a LLDP cache plugin, an IPv4 address plugin, an interface name plugin, so quite a lot of things. And together with the hardware-software inventory, you then get this information. Yeah, so you can see what are the LLDP neighbors, for example, for a switch or for a router, I think. And if you then also activate host tables with it, you can then start using the tool. First, you have to configure it. You have to at least, I think, add the seeds for your for the starting points. Then you can basically run this automatic analysis of the network connections. So the tool basically starts trying to match what it finds in the data on the inventory with what it is in Checkmk. It does a lot of basically, there's a lot of knowledge, know-how around how networks are basically working, how different vendors are using the data, how they are assigning values. And then with the matching, in the end, you get this network visualization. And then you can use that to further tune the configuration. And for me, this is, I think, also a prime example for great collaboration between us and the community. Because building that is really not easy. You need a lot of network knowledge. It's, you can only do that if you really know how Cisco versus how others, even how in between Cisco things work. And you need to be someone who really lives and breathes networks. And I'm very happy that we actually have someone in our group here who does that. And the first time I heard about this guy, Thomas, was via Andreas, who was just on stage. And because I always thought Andreas is writing everything himself, he has like this huge collection of plugins, and I mean, the crazy guy, he must be coding all day long. But then I learned the network pieces, at least he's using from this other colleague of him at Bechtle, who writes a lot of plugins. And I thought, man, this must be a Checkmk admin or Checkmk monitoring consultant. He's not. He's actually a Cisco expert, and he does Checkmk stuff only in his free time. So he, I don't know, spent evenings and weekends to create this. I think this is really very special. And Thomas, your contribution is priceless. So I also got a little award for you. Can you maybe come on stage, please? Remember that guy? If you have questions, Thomas. Yeah. If you have questions about it, Thomas is here in the breaks. He's all here during the entire conference. You can see on his GitHub profile, you can also speak to him. He has a good how-to guide, how to use it. He really likes this thing, so I think when he gets feedback, he will definitely consider your feedback and work on it. So, and he's also a great person if you need something developed. So I think even though he's not a Checkmk consultant or Checkmk monitoring consultant, he's a great resource if you want something added to Checkmk for yourself. I need the slides again. Okay. So, a great user experience is one of our core principles for Checkmk nowadays. And we've extended our UX team further and have already done many things in Checkmk 2.3, and there will be many more things which are coming soon. And these UX improvements, we have our strategy basically is we try to create more consistency in Checkmk to make things predictable so you can navigate and use Checkmk effortlessly. Efficiency is another pillar of our UX strategy. Make things swift so that your tasks are a breeze. error prevention and recovery. Make things foolproof so that you can stay on track even when things go wrong. And lastly, accessibility, making things inclusive so that every IT pro can excel at Checkmk. And I won't speak about it myself. Tanya will speak about all the things they did in 2.3, and it will be, I think, one of the highlight talks for today later. Enabling users to extend Checkmk by developing plugins, as you've seen people do, but also via automation is one of the other pillars of Checkmk. And we have now all aspects of creating monitoring plugins covered, from the special agent and active checks to the check plugin itself, to metrics, graph, performeters, and rule sets. And also here, I won't talk about it. Moritz will talk about it later today in depth. We also worked on the REST API, of course, and I won't bore you with all the detailed endpoints which we added, just mentioning them here. For notification rules, you can now also automate, you can basically create them via the REST API. Also, the dynamic configuration is configurable via the REST API now. You can retrieve and archive audit logs and a lot of other things. We also improved a lot of stuff around the REST API. For example, better handling of custom attributes, handling of distributed environments better. Yeah. One example for the use of the REST API is the Ansible collection. And I think we have a little anniversary also to celebrate. Version 5.0.0 was released, I think, on Monday this week. And it's the project which really utilizes the REST API. And it's a community project which is driven by a couple of colleagues of mine, especially by Robin, by Max, and by Lars. And thank you for doing that, for really basically creating this project and putting all your heart into it and driving it. And what is quite nice about this project is that it's another good example of how you can actually have a community project out there. And there are many people active in the project which I've never heard of and I've never seen before. One of them is Michael, and I think he's a Raw Edition user, and he's also not here today. And he has made continuously improvements over the last years. I mean, you can see. And he really does a lot of things, and we want to at least say a little bit of thank you to him as well. And therefore, we also have a nice award for him. We will send it to you. And you really deserve this. So a little applause for him. Maybe he's watching on stream. And if you want to come next year, Michael, if you listen to that, just contact us. I think we can make something happen. The final piece to Checkmk is, of course, the underlying platform. And we continuously strive to make it more secure and scalable. And I think last year we added two-factor authentication, or 2 years ago, and now we actually also added Authenticator app support to make the two-factor authentication of Checkmk much more powerful. Such apps, they generate time-based one-time passwords, which you can now use. Besides, for example, using UV keys as of today. We also did a lot of security best practices. Might annoy you a little bit, but there's a default password policy in Checkmk now. Passwords have to be at least 12 characters long. You can obviously override it in the settings, in the over settings of Checkmk, but it's one of we always try to improve the security of Checkmk, and there are a lot of things which we do under the hood, and there's a lot of things which you might not see, but some of the things like what you see here is, happens as part of all our security efforts. For example, there's also now a security log, a dedicated security log, which logs failed authentication attempts, which logs CSRF tokens which were unsuccessful, which were not found or couldn't be validated, or password changes, for example. When it comes to performance, we typically focus on two major pieces: UI loading times and activate changes execution time. And instead of listing all the improvements to UI loading, I have brought two examples to showcase how we typically do it. Every Checkmk service has or had this add to menu. And the problem with that one is it's being loaded really whenever you open a host or when you open a all host view, this is being loaded. And if you have a lot of dashboards, if you have a lot of reports, all of them are read and then loaded already, even if you don't need them. And this can lead very well to high loading times of the UI, even for an action which you might not do very often. So we did a very simple solution. It's not as fancy and sexy anymore, but the Add To button is basically now as part of the menu, and only when you click on it, things are being loaded. And as a consequence, all hosts and all service views should be much, much quicker for anyone who has a lot of reports and dashboards. Another example for effective performance boosts to the UI can be shown here in the audit log. And we reworked the audit log, and before there was no audit log rotation. So you can imagine this log can grow very large. And when you try to load that big log into the UI, it takes almost forever. And so the solution was also there, straightforward. Let's just introduce audit log rotation. Whenever it has more than 300 megabytes, it's being rotated. This is something which is also included in the update mechanics. So when you update to 2.3, automatically the audit logs will be structured and split into the several logs. And as part of that, we're now able to redesign the audit log page. So there's a selector now, so only a much smaller file is being loaded, and so therefore it's much faster. We also did a couple of performance boosts for distributed setups. For example, improving the parallelization of computations so that more sites can perform the activation at the same time. We also did some improvements with Checkmk MSP so that the activate changes there goes fast as well. Besides that, we also have another platform. We have the appliance. And the appliance finally went to Debian 12. And it was actually not a simple thing to do. It actually cost us quite some time. And as part of that, we had to migrate to a new file system to overlay FS. And that was, I think, the largest effort as part of that. And while we were at it, we also added UEFI support. We upgraded the bootloader to grub2. And yeah, so I think since then we also added further things to the appliance. And I think we are now at 1.7.2 because when you do such a major change, a lot of things basically can happen. And so, yeah. Speaking about updates, probably a lot of you know this view or some view like that. I mean, probably not that many, but I mean, I'm always biased because when I look at support tickets, I see things like that more often than the average user. And actually, errors happening during the update is something which can happen, especially if you have custom extensions. And in 2.2, we already added the pre-flight check for updates. And so before you do the update or while you do the update, Checkmk checks, is there a problem in the configuration? And what we now added is a much better pre-flight check. Because now the actual site update only happens after you see the last line here. Only if you can see your site now has version 2.3, blah, blah, blah. Actually, the site update has happened. If there's an error which the pre-flight check has found, you can abort and it will completely revert to the previous state, so to the previous version again. So you can just go on, fix things without having to end up in a deadlock or whatever not desirable situation. So this protects you a lot more from issues during the update. And with that, as you can see, the update has become a little bit better as well. We have a lot of new features. I hope you have gotten an appetite for Checkmk 2.3. I also hope you have gotten an appetite for lunch, because that's going to happen soon, I think. And we prepared a lot of, for 2.3, a lot of resources, further reading materials. I really recommend reading through all these works. It's only 1,250. I mean, I did. And check out the release notes, something which we introduced last year for Checkmk 2.2. It says which operating systems are supported, which browser versions are supported with Checkmk. Gives you a little bit more of reliability on what we will support with Checkmk. Also, the update guide is something which I can really just recommend to read. We dedicate a lot of time into writing it to warn you of potential pitfalls in different setups. And yeah. One more thing, by the way, before you run for lunch, when we do a major release, this is a big effort for us. We do a lot of testing nowadays internally, but to be honest, you can never detect all things. There are always things in production environments which have grown over the time. If you started with Checkmk 1.something, 1.28, then over the time, there's just, these are very organically grown setups. And there's so many edge cases where we can't automate the testing for. And as such, for the first time in our history, we want to thank really the people who did a lot of beta testing, because it might not be a lot of effort for some of you, but for us it's really a big thing, because it really helps to protect other people from experiencing the same problems. And therefore, these people actually get also a couple of awards. One of them is SVA. Gerd, maybe you can stand up as a representative for your colleagues. You will get a nice award from someone. Gerd, are you there? Also, the Rive guys, I mean, they were quite interested in our HTTP check, of course, so they did a lot of feedback for us. You will also get a nice award. I think you're sitting somewhere there. I saw you somewhere here. There they are. Thanks very much. And Comnet, of course, very happy because you did actually find quite a lot of things. Even if you felt like this was not a big contribution for us, it was a big thing. So thanks to the Comnet guys, they're here in the front. Here they are. Oh, yeah, okay. And besides companies, we also had individuals who were very helpful, and I think both of them are not here today. I mean, maybe the one guy who came from Canada on short notice is Daniel, but I don't know. So we had Markus from Switzerland. Markus is a very fun guy. He found one bug which was very embarrassing, and I'm very happy that he found it, because otherwise you would have probably found it when we only had released stable. So thanks for that. And also, whenever we do get bug reports, it's never trivial. Like, some are very trivial, like where we immediately know what is broken, but sometimes it's really not straightforward, and it requires a lot of troubleshooting on the user side to figure out what really is broken. And Daniel really had a lot of stamina. He really helped us a lot with troubleshooting a couple of bugs. And thanks to you, Daniel, as well. We will send the award to you to Canada. And thanks for your patience. And the last award, don't worry, now you can almost go to lunch soon, is our Olli Kahn Memorial Award. And it's a special one. For the non-Germans here, Olli Kahn, he was the goalkeeper of Bayern Munich, a legendary goalkeeper. And he was asked post-game interview why they lost 0-2 versus Schalke. And his answer was, balls. We need balls. And just a few weeks before the release, I actually called a couple of our partners, because we needed more input, because we didn't feel like the release is yet there that we can that we feel confident to put it into the wild. And so we actually asked, and most said, can't update my custom environments. It's very risky to do so. I'd rather wait a little bit. And one person actually said, okay, I'm going to do it. And he trusted us enough and had the balls to do it. And therefore, André, you also get an award. And it was actually very good that André did it, because he found 2 bugs during the update. Unfortunately, he was able to fix them immediately, because, I mean, he knows Checkmk quite well. So that's Checkmk 2.3. It's out there. Try to play around with it. Let us know what you think about it. we really would like to hear your feedback on it. There are many things which we plan for the future as well. We will go into much more details into some of the specific bigger things later in the afternoon. And now let's see if we have some time for questions. I think 5 minutes for questions. No, I just need to get the question somewhere. Okay. First question, any plans to expand monitoring of Proxmox? Actually, to be honest, right now not. But it's something very easy for us to do. I mean, if so many people ask for it, it's something we could do because we have a big Proxmox environment ourselves. We have a Proxmox specialist in-house. And I think Alex, our Proxmox guy, will be quite happy if we do it. We would just need to know what exactly you guys need. So please go to the plugins playground. There's a guy called Niklas. Talk to him. He will collect your input. And then I think what we just need is, what are your ideas? What do we need to extend? And for Proxmox, I think we can do it. Marius, I think, yeah. So the Redfish checks could replace the current management board checks in general. That's the idea. So that's where we're all heading to. I mean, we see the industry, like almost every big vendor is already supporting Redfish. I think this is really, it helps us because we have unified services. All the services have the same service, so it allows us to build actually quite better analysis, better dashboards, all these things. So this is where we are heading. And that's why we also will mainline it. That's why we need your feedback. If there is one management board where it doesn't really work, I mean, it happened because not every management board supports Redfish and has all the things. But this is our goal. I mean, it's also Andreas's goal. So please report bugs at Andreas. Roadmap topics we can address in the roadmap talk tomorrow. The check certificate, we will also talk about that in the HTTP talk, so we just put it there later. And that's a very important one. Lars, maybe can someone give a microphone to Lars, because Lars, you can answer that one. Why is the Checkmk service not named Checkmk? Because I want it, but Lars says no.
I mean, hello?
Stand up, please.
Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, mic is on. Actually, that's mostly a migration issue. You can imagine that's the service that has been there since day one, and dozens of rule sets somehow being tied to it. And if you would now change that in existing installations, that would be a major pain for, I guess, all of you. So that's the reason why we hesitate to rename that. For new installations, you could think, well, we might want to do that because that's a clean environment, but then you have the user menu and the videos, tutorials out there which need to mention, yeah, in previous to version X, it's this and then it's that. And that's another issue we would have to manage, and not only we, but also you. And so that's basically the reason why we kept it untouched so far. Maybe there's a day where we want to rename that, but that's a high price to pay. So this is why it is like it is.
Bontek, are you here? Ah, there he is. Because we can talk about, Robert, your question about the service rediscovery button for check parameters. I mean, Moritz, you can also answer it, but I think as Bontek did the service labels, I think, and it's actually there will be good news, but there's also a little bit of sad news why we didn't do it now. Bontek. Does the new service rediscovery button also update check parameters?
So in short, it doesn't at the moment, but as Martin said, there's some good news. It's something we're working towards too. So this is something you can basically look forward to. Yeah, as in we are changing the underlying structure. As Martin showed in the presentation, it's an approach we try to do with the checkboxes, so you're able to control like the granular stuff. Yeah, so basically look out for it in the near future.
It was actually already part of Checkmk 2.3, but there were so many UI issues with it, because imagine how do you display all these check parameters in there, and we just finished this feature just before the release, and we said this is too risky to put in, so we rather really refine that and make it a proper feature and then put it into Checkmk. But will be coming soon. Can someone click away these things, because I can't read the stuff? I mean, you can put them into archive, because later, or like that. Or is this the message that I should stop and we should go for lunch? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So thanks very much. Enjoy lunch.